The TikTok ban has been all over the news. Everyone is pretty much aware of it. TikTok has 170 million users on there in the United States. And of course, leading up to this ban on January 19th, where it was out for about 12 hours, you had a lot of misinformation and conspiracy theories from content creators trying to get clicks and likes, most of them really revolving around who's going to be acquiring it, with the most predominant conspiracy being that Meta is doing this to acquire TikTok. But the honest truth is, based on the evidence that I've seen for the past few years, I don't think Meta wants to, nor they think it's a smart idea to acquire TikTok, knowing the legal hot waters they've been in for the past few years after the acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp and the potential antitrust lawsuits that are coming forth about that. We'll discuss this and more, but first, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel to see more of my content, and of course, check out all of my social media down below in the description. And yes, I will be talking about how I did check out RedNote, which is in those social medias down there, also known as Xiaohongshu. But that entire app, I think, warrants its own video to discuss. We will talk a little bit about it, though, and as we progress in this video. TikTok is one of the largest social media applications with 170 million Americans on there, and seeing as the US population is around 330 million people on there, that means that roughly half the US population is on TikTok. And if you aren't on TikTok, then you probably know someone who is on TikTok. And for many of you out there saying that this isn't much of a big deal, you really haven't been on the app to understand how economically this has been so beneficial, especially to small businesses, including when I ran my own Etsy shop. Almost all traffic for my little 3D printing shop when I was running it on Etsy came in through TikTok. And this is not out of the norm for a lot of small businesses who are on TikTok. A lot of small businesses say that TikTok was the main driver of a lot of their business traffic. That's not to add on top of it that there is, of course, the whole creator economy. There's a lot of content creators that may be just only on TikTok, or in the case of many others, may have started on TikTok, or at least it's one of the applications that's in their portfolio that they use. I myself started on TikTok, and if it wasn't for my start on TikTok, I wouldn't be making these YouTube videos right now, going live stream or anything, because it all started on TikTok with my community I built on TikTok, to the point that even to this day, TikTok accounts for, depending on the month, anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 of all of my content creator income. Granted, it's not like I can live off the total amount that I'm making as a content creator. This is a fun little side hustle and hobby that I do on the side on top of my cybersecurity career that I have. But nonetheless, it does at least pay for my home labbing and my tinkering, and I'm looking to build this up more so I can get into doing more content around cybersecurity, IT, and other such education. But with that being said, I really think it's a bit upsetting when I see a lot of people that don't understand why there were a lot of content creators that were crying. If it wasn't, for the issue of the monetary side of things, which I know a lot of people who are disabled, that literally TikTok was the only thing that helped them get enough monetary padding to be able to buy the things they need. If you aren't aware of how bad the US disability income system is, it's horrible. I had an ex who was on disability, and I remember I basically had to at least give her, I think it was like $600, $700, $800 a month extra while we were together, just to make sure she could actually have the things that she should have, because she had to budget basically $700 of discretionary income per month. That's how bad it is, at least in her case, when I recall. Also, a lot of us built our communities on there. I myself found one of my mentors, Kernel Dump, which we've hung out at DEF CON and such, through TikTok. Most of my peers that I actually have nowadays in cybersecurity and IT, a lot of us connected through TikTok. If it wasn't for TikTok, a lot of us wouldn't have these connections. And I would also say, if it wasn't for TikTok and the push that my community had for me to want to drive to educate y'all better, so in fact also made me have to educate myself more on things, I probably wouldn't have progressed from the IT person I was when I started on TikTok in a managed service provider, all the way up to the cybersecurity engineer today with a CISSP certification. I owe a lot of that, in fact, due to TikTok. That is why I think a lot of people are upset. The reality is a lot of social media, when you look at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, they don't really foster community. And that is one thing that I think TikTok was really rather unique compared to a lot of the other mainstream social media out there. We developed communities. I've heard from many other creators that when they made a post on Instagram, they would barely get any traction. The algorithm on Instagram is absolutely horrible for those of you that are like, just go to Instagram. Well, the reality is the monetization on Instagram is horrible. They have a lottery system. You are not guaranteed income, whereas TikTok, it's as simple as 10,000 followers. You can apply for the creator fund, and there you go. Whereas Instagram, there's no real guarantee that you will get paid for it, nor that you will get the views. And in fact, I've talked to many friends about this. No one really gets discovered much on Instagram. It's a very small amount of things that are discovered on Instagram. Most people go to Instagram after they learn of a celebrity, a person you've met in real life, a company or such, and then follow them by going up to Instagram and then entering the thing that they were actually going to follow. Whereas TikTok, it's the complete opposite. Most people find things on TikTok through TikTok. Instagram, it didn't really feel as much as that. And YouTube Shorts, don't even get me started on there. That is just a horrible algorithm. It's not that well designed and everything like that. And to that point, when a lot of people were like, okay, so where are they going to go? Well, a lot of us did take a stand, and then we went over to a actual Chinese-owned app, RedNote, also known as Xiaohongshu. And the honest truth is, originally we did this to stick it to them, because the common misbelief is that TikTok is a Chinese company. They're not really. ByteDance, the parent company, actually got American capital funding when they started the whole thing. And yes, while they are in China, TikTok has an American entity, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, that TikTok itself isn't allowed in China. The Chinese equivalent of TikTok is called Douyin, and that's a totally different kind of vibe for things. Be that as it may, so we went over to an actually Chinese-owned app. Kind of just to stick a finger to you. And for those of you that are really worried about the data collection practices, the reality of it, and I've been poking at my pfSense firewall for all the logs and everything, TikTok barely collects or sends data on you compared to Meta apps, and even RedNote was barely collecting any data. And the data that it is collecting, for those of you that are not aware of how social media works, all social media apps, Twitter, Facebook, Threads, all of them, they collect data of certain sorts to better improve the app as well as tailor the algorithm to you. They need to know, what are you talking about? What are you engaging with? That way they can cater the content better to you. But in the case of Meta, Meta is really noisy on a network if you actually look into the network logs and everything like that. The same concerns that people have with social media collecting data should be addressed by a law around privacy. In the EU, most of you are aware of GDPR, or General Data Protection Rights, or Regulation, sorry. Well, a lot of people don't know, many other countries are developing their own privacy laws to regulate how much information one can collect and how they handle it. Now, in South Africa, they have, I believe it's Popl, and then you have in Canada, you have Pipeda. Well, China has Pipl, which is equivalent basically to the GDPR. But meanwhile, in the United States, we don't have any regulations. It's editing me again. So we do have some regulations, but not a general data protection regulation that covers all this kind of data like social media and everything. Yes, we have things like HIPAA, high-tech FedRAMP, and things like that, but nothing that's going to cover all that technology here. I just figured I needed to jump in here before somebody ripped my head off about that particular point. I know there are regulations, but in this particular case, there really isn't any in comparison to the rest of the world. So the Chinese apps that I'm actually connecting into have more regulations and limitations of what data can be collected and how it can be handled than our own American apps. What I'm trying to say is that the core issue with TikTok isn't the data that they're collecting, It's that we need an overall general data protection regulation for the United States to address this problem, because it's an issue across the board. I've talked about it in a lot of my other prior videos, like when we had the National Public Data Breach, the MC2 breach. All of these breaches have the same thing in common, where these data brokers can get your information from anywhere, including social media, and then they build profiles on you. And oftentimes these data brokers are where your information is getting leaked. So that is one thing that needs to be addressed there. Overall, TikTok isn't really the issue. I think it was more so of a ploy by Meta to actually knock out competition. The thing you have to understand is that Meta can't really innovate. They haven't for years. About a decade ago or so, they acquired Instagram. Why did they do that? Well, at the time, more people were starting to use Instagram as a daily app when it was independent from Meta, or back then, Facebook. They acquired it because they were afraid that people were going to use Instagram more. And in many cases, that is true. And then they also acquired WhatsApp. Why? Because more people were starting to use WhatsApp for messaging than Facebook Messenger, which then meant they couldn't collect all that information, metadata, and other things from your Facebook Messenger, so they actually started collecting metadata and other things through WhatsApp. They say it's end-to-end encrypted, but I've had situations where I have had conversations with people only on WhatsApp, and when I had a Facebook profile, would recommend that same person that I was talking to on WhatsApp, even though we had no mutual connections. That really weirded me out, and again goes back to the point of general data protection regulations. Circling back to conspiracy theories, the primary one, of course, being that Meta is behind the TikTok ban because they're trying to acquire TikTok. Well, the reality is that the Federal Trade Commission has really been having some soul searching since the acquisition of Instagram was approved, and is actually looking at, over the past few years, teaming up with states, many of their attorney generals, to have Meta divest Instagram and WhatsApp. Many people are seeing Meta as a monopoly, and that was as far back as 2020. Now, I do recall that the attempt at this antitrust lawsuit was refreshed back in November, and I know many of you are going to say, well, Donald Trump is coming into office right now and Zuckerberg is buddying up to him. They're probably not going to do anything about that. That may be true, but one can only kick the can so far. And for many of you out there that are saying, well, you know, Congress has invested so much in Meta, they probably won't do anything about that. Congress isn't the FTC and the state attorney generals, not to mention that same argument kind of flies in the face because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people had stocks in Microsoft when they were going through their own antitrust lawsuit and Bill Gates was kicked out. But I digress. A lot of the conspiracies really center around things like they saw ads for using Instagram and Facebook prior to the ban, when in reality, I had my own TikTok back at the end of March in 2023 that was actually showcasing they had ads trying to get people to download Facebook and Instagram. So they've been on there for a while doing ad spend to try to get people over there. Now, with that being said, that was an easy thing to debunk. It wasn't anything new related to this. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, Zuckerberg and Shao are meeting up at Mar-a-Lago or things like that. Look, Trump is having a bunch of people meet with him to kiss the ring. I mean, yeah. Anyway, with that being said, all of those things, then you have people that are trying to say, well, all of a sudden, TikTok is asking me to connect Facebook to find my friends. Well, the honest truth is you don't need Meta involved to do that. Meta has their own entire API, so you can integrate this into your websites and social media without actually directly being involved with Meta. You have to understand that Meta, for better or worse, with the billions of users that they have, is more or less the phone book of the entire world, and in some sense makes a lot of sense that you can actually connect with people on other apps that you wanted to connect with before that were in your circle on Facebook. But my understanding also, according to some friends, because I didn't really pay attention and look for this feature because I don't have a Facebook profile anymore, but This feature has apparently been in TikTok for years, and people were making much ado about nothing. It was probably just bugging you all of a sudden to do it because of the people, using the app. And I'm having the memory jostled out of me that I do remember TikTok bugging me for that once in a blue moon. I just must have blocked it out of my memory until I was actually talking right now about this whole thing, believe it or not. Needless to say, I think it's much ado about nothing. Now, of course, when you opened up the TikTok app, it wasn't even January 20th where Trump actually became president, and they already had a little message basically thanking Donald Trump and all of that. And a lot of people are taking it to the extreme because they're saying, I'm seeing a lot more, far-right content and being censored and things like that. Here's the honest truth. I get false positives all the time with my content and comments and things like that on TikTok. I have been banned on TikTok Live multiple times for quote-unquote hate speech. Many of those times, I was literally playing Wolfenstein. So that whole imagery, of course, would trip some filters. You appeal, it goes through, 99% of the time, no problem. But as far as the type of content that people are seeing, you have to understand, they shut down for 12 hours. And when you have an enterprise as large as TikTok, things are going to go wonky for a while. We're probably going to have to wait a few weeks for proper normalcy. Now, will they modify the algorithm? Probably. They do modifications of the algorithm all the time. You can kind of notice it. Now, I don't think it's really worth playing much into it to say, well, it's going to be a far-right app and all that. Let's wait and see before we start putting our tinfoil hat on and thinking it's going to go for that reason. With that being said, I really don't think it was a good idea for TikTok to shut down for just 12 hours. Hey there, it's Editing Chief Geek 3D. So I had a little gut feeling here while I was editing this section here to dig a little bit further, and I'm glad I did because it didn't look like it was TikTok that shut down their servers per se. It was Oracle, where, if you remember a few years ago, TikTok, to appease the US government, moved American data onto American servers controlled by an American company, and that was Oracle. They were apparently ordered around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this past Saturday, the Saturday before the ban, to have employees start shutting down TikTok servers. And that actually explains a whole lot of things about the timeline and a lot of the things and why they went wonky. Not to mention, if you know about Oracle's head, he is a big Trump supporter, so there was probably some discussion there between Larry Ellison and Donald Trump to get the, servers allowed to be turned back on. Because it wasn't just like TikTok would say, yeah, we're good. You have to worry about all the American partners that TikTok has to work with to get approval because they're not allowed to do business with TikTok under the ban unless the government approves. But not only that, you have to understand that TikTok is one of Oracle's largest customers, and that is going to cost Oracle, an American company, money. So I think that played into a lot of these negotiations to get TikTok turned back on so soon. That didn't make sense to a lot of us. It just is feeling like a lot of backroom deals that were going on to move things along a little bit faster. That's at least my perspective on things. But anyway, let's get back to the video. Whereas if I were in Xiao's shoes, that's kind of funny to say, I would actually have stopped the app for several days. Give people several days to actually experience an outage, because this it felt like a really unnecessary PR stunt. Only 12 hours, and on a Saturday night to Sunday, it's just so weird. And they didn't even close it at midnight. They closed it around like 10:30 or something like that. I luckily had a gut feeling and did my little live stream where I thought it was a whole farewell. There's another YouTube video of my little farewell over there because we honestly didn't know what the situation was going to be. Now, with that being said, I think that a lot of people need to take a little step back and probably go touch some grass, which I hope a lot of you did like me with the whole TikTok ban, because the reality is I would wait and see with what's going on right now. Who are the potential buyers? I did see there was a potential buyer that was talked about, but nothing has been confirmed as of right now. ByteDance hasn't discussed anything, not to mention the fact that apparently the information out there is that the reason why it's hard for them to sell TikTok, especially in the time frame they have, is they would sell the platform as is, but not the algorithm. And if you might be asking why that is, well, TikTok's main sauce is the algorithm. And I really have to say that this whole incident really, I think, shot a lot of the US government in the foot. And this is where we're going to start talking about RedNote, also known as Xiaohongshu. A lot of TikTok creators, including myself, were actually looking at what we were going to do leading up to the ban. A lot of you are probably thinking, well, why not YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels? And the honest truth is those are horrible. And a lot of us also wanted to do another form of protest, which is why a lot of us installed the app RedNote, also known as Xiaohongshu. And this protest pushed us so hard that you had Americans, which predominantly are monolingual. There are very few bilingual or polyglot Americans I have come across, unless you are first generation, such as myself, or you immigrated in this country, or you are one of the very few cultured people that understood to be a proper citizen of the world. You probably should understand a few languages, because, you know, not everywhere's going to speak English. That's the honest truth. I can tell you that from when I was in Morocco. I had to speak more French. Oui, je parle du en français. But be that as it may, it drove a lot of people to learn Mandarin. You had this whole cultural exchange going on. But not only that, a lot of Americans started to fall in love with the Xiaohongshu app a lot more than TikTok because the UI, the UX, the whole design, a lot better. Yes, most of the app is in Mandarin. I'm literally having sometimes to use Google Translate on my iPhone to read what's on my Samsung so that I can go through it. But this is how you learn a language. You immerse yourself in the culture and everything like that. I can tell you that as someone who lived overseas. This is probably one of the better ways, at least while you're on American soil, without going to conversation groups and things like that, to start learning other languages. You can't just fire up Duolingo and then think you're going to have a language. You have to have ways to immerse yourself in the language to better learn it. Back to the point where I say that Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts really aren't that great. This is my Xiaohongshu profile. I've not even been there a full week. I have more followers than I ever did on Instagram, trying to grind that for a few years before I privated it and said, not worth my time. I have more followers on Xiaohongshu than I do on my YouTube, despite making videos and stuff on there, and I've barely made any posts on there. I now also am able to connect with a whole Chinese contingent of tech, IT, and cybersecurity people, so we can not only have a cultural exchange, but an information exchange, because that's really what I'm all about. I'm really about trying to educate and talk about technology so we can better everyone's skills as we progress our careers and everything. And a lot of these people don't have access to a lot of the things that we do. So it's really wonderful that I've opened this door to a whole other audience that I can talk to about technology that is just as thirsty to grow. And it's actually put the seed now where I'm curious about not only visiting Shenzhen, which I've had on my bucket list for many years, but further exploring the possibility of becoming a Chinese KOL. Hey there, it's Editing Chief Geek 3D again. So I realized when I said Chinese KOL that might confuse people. It's basically just an influencer. It's kind of like a key opinion leader kind of deal, but more or less it's just me doing the same thing, but in a Chinese market. And for a lot of you, there's apparently a lot of people that do this. I mean, like, for example, John Cena is a Chinese influencer as well. It was kind of interesting to see the amount of American celebrities and such that actually are influencers out in China to promote different things and educate on different things. And yeah, so be that as it may, getting back to the video, because I've had nothing but good experiences talking to these people and talking about technology and exchanging ideas and learning about the internal ecosystem technologically inside of China that I didn't have access to for most of my career. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to actually peer into the Great Firewall, or behind it, to be correct. And the honest truth is, I think the US government shot themselves in the foot, and they're realizing that, because I'm not alone in this sentiment where even though TikTok is back, I'm not going to abandon Red Note, Xiao Huangshu. I'm going to keep posting on there. It's going to be different content than on TikTok, and I can't talk about certain topics like Tor. And, while people do mention VPNs in my comments, it's not something I can really dive into all that much. But I think it is a beautiful thing as well, because it's also woken up a lot of the American people to what I've been saying for years. And people often in America would get upset at me when I would say, if you travel outside the USA, you realize that the USA is a third world country wearing a Gucci belt. And a lot of Americans, while on Xiao Huangshu, woke up to that reality. We were seeing cars that were a lot cheaper and better than American cars. We're talking about, you could get a full car for $20K. You got cars in there that had projectors with screens from Xiaomi, zero gravity seats, and, all that stuff. Way better than Tesla. I think it was like 50, 60K. No wonder they're putting 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, because we in the American market can't compete. We're falling behind in a lot of our technology, and I think that's why they allowed the TikTok ban to be lifted, because a lot of Americans were starting to ask probably a lot of questions about why this is the way it is when we're comparing grocery prices, we're comparing healthcare costs, we're comparing incomes, free income that we have left over after, for discretionary income after we do all of our expenses. We're comparing time off, paid time off, vacation, all of that stuff. We're comparing all these notes, and we're realizing not only was the Xiao Huangshu algorithm way better than a lot of American social media, but a lot of the technology they have over there is starting to surpass us, including the algorithms in Xiao Huangshu. It was honing in on me and what I was looking for in tech pretty fast. I could find a lot of things about travel and all of this stuff. It was really beautiful to actually see the American and Chinese people, not the American and Chinese government for once, coming together to discuss things so we could actually see how different, how alike are we, and come to a better understanding. I hope that this vibe that we have continues. Now, of course, it's been a week in. I mean, the welcome wagon is probably going to start wearing off anytime soon. They're like, 12, 13-hour difference, so when we get up, they go to sleep. But I think that as long as we can be respectful, I think this can be a win-win situation for the Chinese people and the American people. And by the way, the Chinese people love Luigi Mangione. It was kind of really interesting to see that. It's really interesting to see the Chinese people and how they live and how they work and their lifestyle, the culture, how their government in many ways takes care of them. Yes, I know we have a lot of history with the Chinese government, maybe not be perfect, but come on, crack open American history book. We ain't that great either. But I really think that this drives home the point that Americans are starting to wake up overall. And originally they were upset that TikTok was causing a lot of people to have discussions over different things. I mean, we had the whole Black Lives Matter, there were indigenous rights being discussed about. A lot of these discussions and awakenings were happening on TikTok. Facebook themselves has been caught in the past actually conducting social experiments and has been proven to boost negative posts and create arguments amongst people to drive engagement to keep you on the app. It's me, Editing Chief. I also forgot to mention about the Cambridge Analytica scandal that Meta has had in the past. That's a whole big issue, plus the time they actually promoted violence against the Rohingya in Myanmar and basically caused a genocide. Like, straight up, I do agree with Amnesty International that Facebook does owe a huge amount of reparations to the damage they caused for these people. And this is just touching, the surface, because the honest truth is, I would actually say, out of all the big tech companies, Meta has to be one of, if not the worst companies in terms of social impacts that it has caused negatively to a lot of different people over time. Anyway, back to the video. It's a totally different feel, whereas in Xiao Huangshu, it's about peaceful vibes for the most part. And I think Americans are so damn tired of being lied to by politicians. I don't know where we go from here, but the whole TikTok ban was interesting nonetheless. there's a lot more questions and things I need to process about that. These were a lot of mostly just my own ramblings on the subject as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about it. I do want to talk about Xiao Huangshu separately at another video in the future, but needless to say, I'm going to continue diving into that and learning more about the things they work there, and I wouldn't be surprised if the American government bans Xiao Huangshu before the Chinese government does, because Americans are going to start asking a lot of questions, and they're going to be doing even more so. Where TikTok will go from here, no one really knows. There's a lot up in the air. There's a lot of uncertainty, but I don't think that TikTok is going over to Meta. There's too much evidence to show that it would actually be more of a burden legally for Meta and eventually bite them in the butt. And I think for them, they would rather see TikTok banned altogether. And even this little compromise here where it's going to be sold potentially to an American company outside of Meta would hurt Meta in the long run. Meta can't innovate, and that's what they need to do. They need to either acquire or ban. Anyway, thank you all for joining me. Happy hacking.